Joburg is expected to launch a probe into construction of a residential complex over a petrol pipeline in Glenvista. This poses a risk to residents of the southern Johannesburg area. Now, the city's Development Planning Committee chairperson, Kock, visited the area yesterday. He joins us now to elaborate on the matter. Graham, thanks a lot for joining us on Newsnight this evening. This is a frightening topic. It is a frightening revelation to know that people's homes are built on an actual pipeline. How?
Thanks, Faith. The thought is very scary, but in fact we've established that the pipeline is not under the building. So that's one huge worry that's off our minds. I spoke to the Transnet official this morning, and he confirmed that they'd been out to the site on Friday and they'd established that it wasn't under any of the buildings. But it points to the potential of a threat that is very real for all of us.
Yeah.
The big worry now is, of course, if there's further development that takes place, which we as a city might be unaware of, because people do build things like swimming pools and they don't necessarily run them through the normal processes. So you could have a situation where that pipeline is punctured through somebody inadvertently using power tools where they shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And the thing is that we have to put processes in place in order to monitor that so it doesn't happen. So it's about risk aversion.
Absolutely. But where is that pipeline currently situated?
It runs through the middle of the complex concerned, and it misses the buildings. So really what it is about designing a complex or any kind of building construction within reasonable safety distance of those servitudes that are run by Transnet and Sasol, and making sure that whatever we do as a city and what we ever allow developers to do as people who want to construct complexes, to make sure that together we mitigate the real risk of those pipes being punctured.
But this is going to bring into questions issues around developers themselves, right? And even those in terms of the rights, number one, the actual checks and balances that have been acquired, town planning issues around compliance. Does due diligence actually go through the necessary chains of command to ensure that, in fact, people are not at risk and buildings are not built under dangerous realities and ornaments in itself? So it says something about how is it that you go and you acquire the actual permission to build on a specific site. Who okayed something like that? Because it is dangerous. Any slight shift, you once again in danger.
You're quite right, Faith, and that is the process of law, and that there are checks and balances in place, and it's about officials competent enough to do their jobs and understand what the risks are and make sure that they mitigate all those risks, both from the side of the city and its officials, and also from the side of the developers and their team of professionals. And we ask for those documents in terms of the legislation. People are deemed to be competent to do a particular job. We accept that, and we have to make sure as a local authority that those people are in fact doing their job. So it's about all the checks and balances that are there, but should in fact be followed very stringently to make sure that there aren't any risks whatsoever.
And then, so when it comes to that specific area in itself, I mean, there is a pipe. It does not necessarily sit under the building in itself, but
it's between buildings.
It is between buildings. Yes. So now it's just almost one that has been publicized that people and even developers should not even touch anything within that area in itself. But as you said, it goes down to the community member who wants to put up a swimming pool and they don't even know what's under.
Exactly, and that's the role that body corporates play. They've got to, in fact, notify their residents of the situation, because when you buy into a complex, people don't tell you about the underlying risks that are there. I'm sure the developers might not have told people buying off plan that, in fact, there was a pipeline running through the complex.
But isn't that illegal in itself?
It's about the ethics of running a business and making money and building and all those sort of things. So, there's the question of the law, and then there's the question of morality and ethical behavior. And I think we as society should, in fact, demand those ethical responses from people, not only from developers and people who want to invest money and take financial risk, but also local authority officials and ourselves as councillors. We, in fact, do have to mind and make sure that we represent the interests of everybody and that people are not placed at risk through unknowns that they might be confronted with.
Yeah. This actually brings into question the power that the purchaser has, or the end user has, or the community has with regards to where they live or where they operate, their places of work from. Because if the developer does not disclose, it is unethical because there's money at the end of it. If the right checks and balances were actually not adhered to, that is a huge risk and it's placing people at risk. So let's talk about the people side of it now. Should people be getting into a place, when they move into a specific place, when they move into a business area, should they actually want and be interested in knowing exactly where, number one, this setting is, this business is, under what falls within the business itself, and also there's the structural environment of the actual nature of the business?
Absolutely, Faith. And I think we as consumers should in fact be asking those questions. We must not be afraid to ask the hard questions. If something doesn't feel right, if something's not sitting well with you, ask the question. Don't be afraid. Children have got this wonderful thing of asking why all the time. And I think we as adults have lost that skill, and we should in fact exercise that right. Because at the end of the day, if we buy footstoots or whatever you want to call it, or off plan, it's a risk we're taking. But we should in fact be well aware of the risk that we're taking. And the only way to become aware is to ask the questions. Go to the local authority official saying, can I have a look at the plan? What are the details? What are the servitudes? All of those things. Why is that there? Why are these markers in this place? What does this pole mean? All of those sort of questions. And I think we're just afraid to ask questions because we don't want to appear to be stupid. But in fact, if we don't ask the questions, we remain ignorant, and that could be to our detriment.
So to avoid ignorance on Newsnight this evening, would you say that there's specific areas, especially within the city, that have been a risk, that you've noticed and identified as it's a high-risk area? There are currently developments that are taking place and that are cause for concern at the moment?
Yes, there are. For example, anywhere near the pipeline or servitudes that carry risks within them. Riverways, natural water courses and things like that. We shouldn't be building in floodlines, but we think it's okay because there's never been a flood there in the last 50 years. But we have things called 100-year floodlines. We should not be building in those. We should not be building in environmentally sensitive areas. All the legislation that we need is in place.
Are there currently places where there are where they've been identified as environmentally sensitive places, and as you're saying, we shouldn't be building there, but there are buildings currently there? And I'm not saying you probably have inherited a problem that you now must solve, but are there those buildings in environmentally sensitive areas that there shouldn't even be a building, but we find ourselves?
Off the top of my head, I can't give you any, but I'm sure there are. It's a natural behavior of human beings that we will eventually push the envelope to the limits, and we will develop, because we're running out of space. So we need to start going vertically, but while we can, we will go horizontal, and that in itself poses risks. We have more hardened areas, so the runoffs are much more severe. We've got climate change, which we sometimes tend to ignore, but at our peril. And those are the things that we need to factor into any approval that we do. There are 4 conditions that we have to comply with before we even look at a building plan, and that is in its nature and appearance. Is it unsightly and objectionable? Will it derogate from the value of adjoining property? Will it disfigure the street in which it's to be built? And most importantly, will it be dangerous to life and property? And if the probability exists, the law says we shall not approve those developments. And that is really an important bit of legislation, and yet we tend to gloss over it because we look at the things that, well, if it complies with this, then we can approve it. That's not the answer. We've got to be way beyond the level of the bar at 33% or whatever it is. It's got to be as secure as possible for the people that we are then putting into those structures and expecting to spend a major part of their life savings in order to create the homes that they want.
Yeah, I'm just thinking at the top of my head, it's all about protecting the people. I mean, I cannot imagine that there's somebody that is living in a house or even in a suburb, and that's been classified as environmentally sensitive, and it's almost living in a place where there's a disaster waiting to happen. It actually is a disaster waiting to happen.